Good evening, friends. My name is Denis Galanzowski. For those who don't know, I've been running my YouTube channel for many years, which is dedicated to Ukrainians abroad. And one way or another, I take part in the lives of Ukrainians who live abroad. And today I would like to talk a little about this in the context of the fact that in recent years, millions of Ukrainians have been forced to leave their homes and go to Europe. And this process of Ukrainians leaving for European countries and more broadly for other countries around the world has continued without interruption. It continued before the start of the full-scale invasion, and it accelerated after the start of the full-scale invasion. And it was exactly after the start of the war, a few months later, that those who decided to leave Ukraine for one reason or another actually started to be stigmatized. Some people lost their homes. Some people's cities are completely destroyed or occupied. Some people left because they feared for their lives, for the lives of their children, for the lives of their relatives and loved ones. Some people want to avoid becoming victims of the territorial recruitment center's criminal actions. And in fact, the only argument that is currently used in Ukraine regarding Ukrainians who decide to leave or have already left is that in Europe, no one is waiting for Ukrainians. Nobody needs you there. No one is waiting for you. And in fact, this is used as an argument that leaving is a bad idea and that Ukrainians need to return home. But well, I don't know, maybe an hour ago I saw some news. It was a statement by Ivana Kobernik, who is an advisor to the Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Who? A statement that clearly shows that, unfortunately, today Ukrainians are even less welcome in Ukraine than they are abroad. And unfortunately, it turns out that Ukrainians living abroad integrate much faster and feel much better than Ukrainians who are, for example, internally displaced persons. That is, these are people who are within Ukraine who have not left their country, as they say, who have not left, as Ukrainian propaganda likes to say, but who have stayed in Ukraine. They just moved, for example, from the east to the west. This is a statement from the advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Education and Science. In Lviv, about 40,000 displaced children are not attending school. And one of the main reasons is the language, because children face intolerance, ridicule, insults, and bullying. Language is difficult. If you've spoken another language your whole life, you can't just flip a switch. There is basically a ghetto of such children there, she added. What does this tell us, friends? This tells us that today, in other countries, in foreign countries, for Ukrainians, there is greater tolerance and greater acceptance, a greater opportunity for Ukrainians to integrate than in Ukraine itself. All matters regarding internally displaced persons. Because our deputies, our government itself, they stir up the language issue and do this to divert attention from corruption, from unpopular decisions, from criminal decisions, and so on. And this hatred that arises based on the language issue, it actually shows that today Ukraine is not for all Ukrainians. But it turns out that Ukraine is only for some so-called proper Ukrainians, for some mythical Ukrainians, of whom there may be 5% in Ukraine, maybe 10, maybe 20, like some kind of superior Aryan race. And for everyone else, there's no place because they're not considered Ukrainians, as it seems from the news that's currently in the headlines. And that's why I think that even this example with these displaced children in Lviv and other regions clearly shows that, if in Ukraine they use the phrase, "Who needs you abroad? Where are you going? Nobody needs you there. You'll just be cleaning toilets there," and so on. Then tell me, please, how is the life of internally displaced persons who move from the east to the west of Ukraine, within Ukraine, any different? And it seems that even if there is strong discrimination, if there is really bad treatment of Ukrainians there, whether abroad or in Ukraine, for those who are internally displaced persons, if there is bad treatment both here and there, then in my opinion, it's much better to be in Europe. for both groups of people. For one reason, because in Europe, at least the standard of living is much higher. And even if we take Poland, which is not a model and not the richest EU country, let's be honest, in Poland, at the very least, the minimum wage is 6 times higher than in Ukraine, while food prices, rent prices are more or less the same. So we see that all these statements that are spread about Ukrainians abroad are very hurtful things to say, right? First of all, they show that there is active work being done now so that fewer and fewer Ukrainians, even after the war ends, decide to return to Ukraine. And they are simply trying to widen the gap that exists between Ukrainians abroad and those who are in Ukraine. There is a lot of aggression, a lot of fake and false accusations, a lot of disinformation, and a lot of negativity. This is being spread, in my opinion, simply to instill an inferiority complex in Ukrainians abroad. As if they are worse, Ukrainians, compared to those proper ones who are in Ukraine and who meet a million other criteria. They speak Ukrainian, donate daily, go to the military recruitment center and update their military records, and observe a minute of silence at 9 o'clock every day. Those who don't criticize the current Ukrainian government, those who support the military recruitment center and their actions, those who support closed borders, those are the standard, right? And we see that everyone else, one way or another, feels uncomfortable in Ukraine. But for some reason, those people, those who aren't perfect, for some reason, they feel comfortable abroad. Why? Why is it that Ukrainians today feel more comfortable abroad, even if there was no war? If you take away the war, take away the fighting, and leave all the other factors, then it turns out that Ukrainians, those same imperfect ones who make up the majority of the people of Ukraine, if you think about it, why? They feel much more comfortable abroad and in foreign countries. It's much easier and much simpler for them to integrate than in Ukraine, in their own homeland. If you know the answer, write it in the comments. It will actually be very interesting to read your thoughts, what you think about this in general, how to relate to it, how you feel if you live abroad. I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts and we'll go through all the comments. So thank you all for your support, for watching. I wish you a good evening, a good night, and see you next time.